again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Perry and the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
Island, and like the lines were always drawn of like, if you like the Rangers, you're a Yankees fan. If you like the Islanders, you're a Mets fan. And now all these Rangers fans are like jumping on the Mets, and I'm like, where is your dignity? Where is your decorum?
We used to be a society. There used to be rules. It's fine.
All right. I am all good. We're good.
All right.
Whatever you want, Steven.
Oh, I'm good to go whenever?
Yep.
Okay, well, this is a fucking mess.
Well, I'll clip it together in the end, so you
Don't worry about it. It's fine. You can. I don't care if I sound like an asshole. It's not going to be the first time. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Forever Mighty podcast. As everyone knows, obviously, we try to wait about 23 games or a month between podcast episodes, so that way we have plenty to talk about. But unfortunately, I do have to report that a thing did happen. Pat Verbeek went out and he did a thing with trades, and people are talking about value and assets, and it is perfect 2024 hockey discourse. It's an East Coast team. There's names involved. There's backstage drama, real upstairs, downstairs shit. Agatha Christie would be proud. Someone did get killed on their way trying to leave. Eddie, obviously, I'm talking about the failed trade of Cam Fowler to the New York Rangers.
That was honestly, that sounds and tracks like the thing you'd be the most bothered by or distracted by, is that not that Jacob Trouba is now a member of the Anaheim Ducks, that Cam Fowler is still a member of the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, half of 8 is 4, and that's the number of times I've cried just tonight alone. I'm not even going to pretend. I'm not watching the game right now. I was driving home, but apparently he has 2 own goals, so I'm in a great mood. But more importantly, we have a very esteemed guest joining us to help us understand what it is exactly Anaheim just got themselves into for the next year and a half, potentially longer, potentially shorter, lots of intrigue, is Avery Beaumont of Offsides News, who covers the Rangers and is, unfortunately for him, a Rangers fan. Avery, how are you?
To the season this year. First year was President's Trophy win. Oh, it's amazing. Everything's beautiful. And I'm like, okay, this is what I actually was expecting.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Okay. How do you feel right now with this trade being done? How do you feel?
Like, it's something that, like, I've wanted for so long that I never actually thought it was going to happen. Like, it's like something you're begging your parents for. And then we actually got it. And just the way that it all shook out was just so messy and so uncomfortable to watch that, like, I couldn't even celebrate. I couldn't even be happy about it because he looked miserable, and he's airing out his dirty laundry on ESPN. It's not really as cathartic as I thought it would be.
Yeah. It's kind of funny the way it's been. This is the epitome of, like, people sharing the no soap operas, just hockey advertisements. You know, I think he's from Boston, so it's not like a homecoming in that sense, but he's coming back to the U.S. after being in Winnipeg, signs this big contract. You know, he's going to be a big part of this team. And I think this was part of them pulling out of the rebuild after the letter and all that stuff. And you can kind of say that for most of it, it went the way you hoped in terms of team success. But it seems like the last couple of years, Rangers fans and the organization specifically have been very invested in him potentially not being on the team anymore.
Very light way of putting it. I mean, at any loss for the past few seasons, it's been like shoot troop out of a cannon. And last year was particularly rough for him. It was just becoming clear that, you know, he works great under a guy like Gallant, who's like really about like Gallant loved him as a player, like because he loves that gritty guy, he loves a shot blocker. And then as soon as Laviolette came in, it was like it was clear he couldn't really adapt to the new system. Like he was just, you know, this has happened twice in like the past 10 years where they get a new coach and the gritty shot blocker doesn't work out anymore, playing a higher tempo game. It's like we can't learn from our own mistakes, basically.
So I'm trying to think, because like okay, Eddie, what were your reactions to this trade when it went down?
The thing for me is, and maybe I haven't watched enough of Jacob Trouba over the last few years, I wanted to try and figure out when the discourse changed around Trouba, because it felt like as soon as like 2-3 years ago he was still well respected for the role that he plays and the style that he plays as being a capable top 4 NHL defenseman, and then the trade happens. I know we've talked about Trouba in the past as a possible way for the Ducks to bring in cap space, but all of a sudden the discourse changed to this guy sucks now. there's no reason the Ducks should be going out and acquiring a guy like this, and that seemed to be the immediate reaction from a lot of Ducks fans, was that if you're going to take on $8 million in cap space for the next couple of years for what people quoted as a guy who's not much better than the players on the roster currently, or a guy that the Rangers want nothing to do with, how are you not getting other assets in return? But honestly, I'm fine with it. I think for where the Ducks are, it's a fine move. Like, Radko Gudas is our only veteran NHL right-handed defenseman. Drew Hellison's the other one who we just called up from San Diego, has only played a handful of NHL games. Beyond that, we don't have any right-handed defensemen in the system. And then from there, it provides you some flexibility to move Cam Fowler, which we kind of joked about earlier on in the podcast, or move John Gibson, who's been part of rumors as a guy that could get moved out the door. Somehow Colorado has not knocked on the door and gone elsewhere to go for him. But it does a few different things for the Ducks, where I don't think Trouba is in that same level of bad, or guys who aren't playing anymore, guys who are injured, where it's a complete salary dump. Like, I think for the Ducks it makes sense. He is better than a few players on the roster. They can use him for the next couple of seasons to allow some of the younger guys to step into the team. And you gave up Vakanainen, who played 5 games this year, and a 4th-round pick to do that. And for the Rangers, I think it makes sense as well, because the cap flexibility they got from being able to dump $8 million in cap space and not have to really give up anything to do that. I think it's one of those rare deals that makes sense for both teams, and clearly the Rangers were able to utilize that cap space fairly quickly and get Shesterkin locked up for long term.
So, Avery, from your end, how do you feel that Chris Drury did? Because, like, my opinion of Chris Drury from the outside has been very up and down. I think he's done a lot of really great things. I think he's done some not so great things, you know, which is to say he's a standard NHL GM. Everything that I have seen is that this is an unequivocal win for him in no uncertain terms. Do you feel the same way?
Just because of, like, we have to see where the team goes from here, but seeing, you know, how much it shook up the guys in the locker room, like, the vibes were not great. Like the long-term effects this is going to have. I know people were like getting in arguments about like, oh, no one's going to want to sign in New York anymore, and that is. Can I swear on this?
Please.
SG, everyone's going to want to sign here. It's like the Leafs in Canada, but in terms of just like the technical aspects of the trade, it's a home run. You got a pick to do a salary dump. Like, that's incredible. With Drury, just like overall, I find it very hard to gauge any New York Rangers GM as long as James Dolan is the owner.
Sure.
Because,
yeah.
Yeah. He has a very heavy hand in a lot of decisions. Signing Trouba was probably a direct result of him being dissatisfied with the level of toughness that the team had going into the rebuild. So, you know, the suddenness of the Trouba trade really did feel like him breathing down Drury's neck and being like, you need to fix this now. So, great. But, you know, they're winning right now, but it get themselves out of the slump, or if it is going to.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I think because cap space is so important in today's NHL that it's hard to say creating $8 million in cap space is a negative in any sense. Then you add in a 4th round pick, which, like, for me, a 4th round pick is the line. If you're getting a 3rd through a 1st round pick, in the eyes of the people making the trade, that is a meaningful pick. A 4th through a 7th, to me, always feels like I need something else in this because I have to go stand in front of people and explain what I did. And in terms of Anaheim, they sent out the best pick they could that is guaranteed almost to not be a top 100 pick, which is totally defensible. They sent out Urho Vakanainen, who's a player I really like, I have a lot of time for, but he had only played in 5 games this year. He wasn't getting in. To what you were saying, Eddie, about the young players, and about specifically about the lack of right-handed defensemen on the roster, I think the thing that's most important is all of our best young players or defensemen are lefties. None of the right-handed defensemen are ready. Like Tristan Luneau, who we kind of all thought maybe over Helleson would have a shot at being the 7th or 6th defenseman, just absolutely isn't. He's down in the minors, and I think it's absolutely the right decision. Drew Helleson came up late as a bit of a surprise. You know, he came up for a couple of games 2 years ago, I think. Him and Lacombe, and they looked pretty good. I think, you know, in terms of what the Rangers got, they got the money, they got a player who they can put in the bottom pair of their lineup and they don't have to worry about it, and they got a pick that they can throw at a dartboard, call it a day. But procedurally from Anaheim, I feel like the criticisms of the trade have fallen into certain buckets. I feel like the majority of it is procedural shit, which is real Excel sheet hockey, and I can't do it because, yeah, every pick matters and every player matters, and that value and that asset management, those are important concepts that need to be at the forefront when you're running an organization. But at the end of the day, this is also about a bunch of people trying to do something together. And if you're Anaheim and you feel that bringing in a guy like Jacob Trouba, who is, you know, he said all the right things early on as far as like, look, man, I'm not coming in here to just take over. Like, that's not what this is. You earn leadership through respect, and I'm just here to contribute and play hockey and have a good time. You know, but he's fucking huge, man. Like, he plays big on the ice. He's going to be given minutes because of his seniority and his draft pedigree and you know, his track record of producing, right? It's fallen off a lot over the last few years. I don't think he's cracked 30 over the last couple years. It's been a bit of an issue as far as his on-ice play, but also, you know, he's playing on a big market team and they're a contender, so everything is going to be picked apart, which isn't to say it's invalid, but the attention level that is going to be paid to the guy who's the captain of the biggest team in the United States. Like, let's not be fucking unserious about this. Like, I think there's a level of scrutiny that's going to come with that like can ignore, I'm rambling a little bit and I apologize, but like can ignore the human element of this, right? Which is that this dude is going to come in and he's going to throw big hits and he's going to grab some of these guys and be like, we're doing this. Like, this matters. You saw that in his first game against Montreal. At the end of the game, he had a shift where he fucking busted his ass, gets up the ice, takes the puck along the right boards, takes it in deep, tries to keep possession. Anaheim is pushing to try to win the game at the end of the game. And he just takes it upon himself to, like, have a shift like that. And it didn't come for anything, obviously. They ended up losing in shootout. But, like, you see that in him in a way. And I think if you're Anaheim, with especially how frustrating this season has been, just from a results standpoint, changing the room is a good thing. I don't think this team has looked particularly inspired. This team hasn't looked particularly together. Me and you, Eddie, are already over the coaching thing, and there's a lot of people who feel that way. Like, there's leaks on Spittin' Chicklets and all that shit about the room hates the coach and all this stuff. Changing the makeup of the room has real value, especially when you've got all these young players on this team that you need to perform well for the next 10 years for any of this to work. So I guess that's my thing, is like, I really felt like a lot of the criticisms of the trade either misunderstood where the team was at, because I did see a few people say things like, well, this doesn't make them contenders now. They're not turning the corner because of this. Well, yeah, no shit, dude. They added Jacob Trouba in 2024. Like, they didn't add 24-year-old Charlie McAvoy. Like, that's not what we're doing. Like, this is very clearly a different situation.
There's not anything the Ducks could add right now that would make them contenders, right? Like, there's no trade out there, barring somehow trading Vakanainen for Connor McDavid. But even then, I can't guarantee the rest of the Ducks roster makes them contenders with that. So, yeah, I mean, the concern we had was, I think, a little bit of big braining some of the opinions with the trade, is looking at Jacob Trouba in a vacuum and his numbers, specifically where he's been this year and last year, and saying, well, that's not much better than the Ducks have. That doesn't really fix any of the problems they have. And I think the reality you have to put yourself in is that really no trade right now fixes any of the major problems the Ducks have. They're not in a position to make a trade to necessarily fix problems. They're kind of shipping guys out the door that are either pending UFAs or guys that don't want to be there, aren't going to be a part of this rebuild. That's, I think, the kind of the spot that I'm in with this. I've said to you multiple times, like, a lot of these trades for guys that aren't, that aren't young guys, or aren't, guys that are going to be a part of the plan, I'm not really there for. But this is one of those kind of rare instances where I'm fine with it. The one thing I do want to ask Avery, because from a Rangers perspective, I'm not on the inside, so I don't know when things changed or if it's always kind of been that way. But it feels like at some point the discourse and the conversation around Jacob Trouba changed. When did that happen? When did he go from being a guy people were happy with, that he was the captain, where he was a fan favorite, to all of a sudden it seems like internally with Rangers fans, they're happy that he's gone now? When did that change for Rangers fans?
And I think him getting announced captain rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because everyone was expecting Kreider to get that. And he's like a fan favorite, beloved veteran. So when Trouba got named, everyone was kind of confused a little bit. And like all the players had to come out and say like, oh yeah, no, he's already been doing this. He's our number one guy in the room. And, we're all scratching our heads like, okay, sure, I guess, if everyone's happy with it. So I think once he was named captain, that magnifying glass immediately locks onto him. And it's like, okay, you're taking this spot from, we have a couple other veterans who could easily step into this role. What are you bringing to the table? And he throws the helmet and stuff like that. I think we're starting to get critical of him because he was having some struggles, and then season turns around, everyone kind of calms down. But last year was really tough for him. I have to look at his stats, but he finished with 6 points and a -3. Or am I looking at the right one? Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't good. He played a handful of games too, so it wasn't. it was not a great season from Jacob Trouba on a team that was excellent, right? So you stand out a little bit more from that.
It was. I've been traded. It's heavily scrutinized no matter what you're doing, no matter what your game is, because it, like you said, it's the most popular team in the States probably, or the most well known at the very least, and you got eyes on you there. But good for the Ducks. Like I was always saying, like, I think Anaheim's a good place for him to end up, when everyone's trying to figure out doing their armchair GM kind of stuff. But Anaheim always made sense to me because, like, you guys have all these young players, and the one thing that Trouba can definitely bring to the team, his game is not where it once was, but his ability to work with, like, young players is, a real asset at the end of the day. He really, like, mentored Keandre Miller, really advocated for him, showed him the ropes, was very helpful in that sense. And, he became captain at a time when Gallant was bullying most of the young players on the team and kind of provided a barrier there. So if you got problems with your coach right now, he can definitely help mitigate that. But yeah, it's like you guys were talking about, you have defenders who need more time to cook. The last thing you guys want to do is, like, end up like Buffalo and rush a bunch of your prospects,
right?
Or like Drysdale and Zegras were super rushed too. You don't want to end up like with more of those situations. So like Trouba can fill that space on the roster. He can be a body on the ice now so that those guys can spend more time in the AHL and actually get those, like, crucial development years.
Yeah. So stylistically, I think you've kind of alluded to it a little bit tonight, and I've seen a few people allude to it. There's this really, like, kind of, I would say, large misconception about what Jacob Trouba actually is. He's 6'3", he's right-handed shot, and he makes these really big hits, and he gets in fights. So I think a lot of people's inclination is that he is a shutdown style defender. But historically, when he's been at his best, what he's actually been is far more of an offensive creator and a supporting offensive piece in the offensive zone. What do you think is, like, actually what he is, like, stylistically, and then, like, what he actually kind of is at this point in his career?
It's like he's kind of trying to embrace that physicality that he's become notorious for, and, like, acting more in that shutdown role because he's realizing, like, he's not playing the same game that he was when he was drafted. But I would never have considered him, like, a pure shutdown guy. We have, like, Lindgren for that. But yeah, he's always trying to make plays. Are they very good? Not necessarily. And more often than not, he might be turning over the puck by doing that. But I see him more as, like, more credit for. I mean, this season, at the beginning of the season, he wasn't playing as bad as last year. Like, he was on the ice for a lot of goals against, but he was also, like, shooting the puck more. He'll drive from the blue line. He's not afraid to get involved in stuff. And so I think he's, like, and I think Anaheim's trying to figure out who they are too. So it's kind of a good meeting point because he can, re-find his game in a new city. I've seen so many jokes about, like, him and Gudas, and they're, like, I saw someone say, like, that's the we bring the boom defensive pair. And I don't necessarily know if that's the case. I wouldn't put him in the same class as Gudas. But, yeah, I think he's somewhere in between a guy who used to be a really good playmaker and a guy who is realizing that kind of guy.
Steven, you're on mute.
I'm so special, guys. You guys don't even understand. I am really something. Fucking hell, I'm so annoyed now. So, one of the things I've seen people be the most critical of Jacob Trouba over lately is his skating. Is his skating like a significant issue, or is it a notable weakness and he was under a magnifying glass? Because there's a difference, and I don't think it's unfair.
Like his skating is, he's not McDavid or anything, but he's not as bad. We have worse skaters on our team for sure. So I don't think it's as much of an issue as people made it out to be.
And that makes sense to me because, again, like what I saw on Monday night, like he was getting up and down fine, and I was like, oh yeah, like he's not a beautiful skater by any stretch of the imagination, but like he doesn't seem to have issues getting where he needs to go. So, I think. All right, so I want to ask you about the Cam Fowler part of this. Were you surprised that there would be another name involved? Did you expect to get something back? Like, in terms of, like, where the Rangers are at, like, who were players you were like, oh, we could possibly get back here?
Toronto. I've always wanted Frankie V back in New York. I really enjoyed him when he was here. So I was kind of praying, fingers crossed. I knew it was, like, not happening because I know he likes Anaheim. He wants to stay there. And we would have to have given significantly more assets to get a guy like that. But I'd heard the Fowler rumblings, and I was surprised at the lack of return. Like, obviously, sorry.
Hey? I can't hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Hi!
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. How do you say that the guy that we got's name? Is it Vekanainen?
Oh, yeah, Vakanainen, yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised to see Vekanainen as the return because I didn't know of him particularly. Obviously, he's only played 5 games this year. I was just kind of, not praying that Fowler wasn't involved, but like hoping that wasn't the case because a guy like Vekanainen we can put in the AHL probably, and he won't like raise a fuss about it. Versus Fowler would need to be up, and frankly, we have prospects we need to bring up. We have Victor Mancini, who's like done a great job so far, and I think the team really wanted him to finally like stay up full time. So I was like, please don't give us another guy we have to put on the third pair.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was, I am real armchair GM-y. Like, I just am, because I guess, like, I think part of it is, like, my brain just looks at it like a puzzle with no real answer. So I just love fucking with it. And one of the things that I was thinking about with Anaheim was, like, I wonder if they would go after, like, Chris Kreider. Because his name was kind of out there, and I think, like, stylistically, you can make a really easy argument that, like, we're going to play him with Zegras. We know that they get on really well in the summer on a personal level, but stylistically, they make a really good fit, and Kreider can go to the front of the net and be out there to kind of police things if anybody goes after Z, which has kind of been a thing at times. And I was like, okay, I wonder if that's, like, Fowler for Chris Kreider, and then they send back Lindgren, who like is good but doesn't work because he's always hurt, and then like we send like Vetrano, and like it was such an interesting thing because it's very clearly two teams who need to make things happen, who really need to change the construction of the roster, but also like don't have a ton of flexibility. Like, that's one of the things for me about this trade that I love for Anaheim, and Eddie, you mentioned it, is this gives them an $8 million buffer, and they don't have to worry about moving guys out and needing cap space back. They can be a little bit more judicious with the way that they make trades for guys like Fowler or Gibson or Fabry or Dumoulin or anything like that. Like, they can move Dumoulin for just whole cloth right now, no big deal. That wasn't the case before, and it was just really interesting that, like, I think two teams that, like, you could make an argument, like, there are several versions of a trade between these two teams that really work, and I never would have thought it was going to happen, because it feels like those are always the teams that never make anything happen.
It did feel like there was going to be more that would be a part of this than what ended up being the final trade details. I wonder, like, we've been hearing this as Ducks fans since we drafted him, that one day Trevor Zegras would return home to New York and become a Ranger. Did any part of you hope or think that it was possible that he would be coming back in some sort of deal involving Trouba?
I mean, Rusty and I have gotten in arguments about this before because I've wanted him so bad. Like, I just think that Kreider and Zibanejad really need someone younger on the wing. That's why I like Vetrano. But yeah, no, just seeing them in the offseason, I really wanted Zegras to come here for a while. But I wonder, did he get injured before the trade or after? Because I wonder if that injury plays a factor in it.
Right before.
Yeah, I think it was a game or so before it happened. Yeah.
I was thinking about that today. I hadn't thought about it. That's a great point.
It makes me wonder, because it's like the Rangers need guys, like, they need to fix things now. So Zegras might have been an option if he could, jump right back in the saddle. But, like, what's going on with him? Like, is he okay? I hear he's getting, like, a second opinion. Like, how bad is that going to be? How many months? So
it doesn't immediately,
seem good. It immediately kills any thought of him going to New York.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you want to talk yourself into it as a Rangers fan, I think you say maybe he goes Mark Stone. They bring him in. He takes up that $575 cap hit, but they can move him onto IR immediately, whatever he's going to have done. Hey, man, it's a knee thing. That stuff takes time. He's got to rehab. He's got to skate, all that stuff. And you just stretch that out, and he comes back at the playoffs. But, like, I don't even know what Anaheim would get back in a trade that sends Trevor Zegras to the Rangers. Like, I assume it starts with Brennan Hoffman and a first-round pick. But there's a lot of people who don't think that that's fair, because Zegras' value could be at an all-time low. So, like, I don't know what it looks like to move him, which is why I think I got so scared when the Trouba thing started to seem real. I was like, just please don't do something stupid. And, like, a lot of people, the Trouba trade is that. For me, I think it's great, and they just didn't give up anything of value.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, like, I don't know if it would have necessarily been, like, Othman at this stage, given, like, where he's at. Just in terms of, like, reputation around the league, unfortunately.
100%.
But I was thinking, like, I was very curious, because randomly they called up, Mancini was down for a while. He's just this young defender we've had on the third pair, but he's been really, really good so far. And they randomly called him up against Edmonton, I believe it was. Like, flew him out like 3:30 in the morning. And I was like, why? Like, it was like one of our other younger defensemen was, like, out with injury when he had just been, like, the best player in the game previously, and then it was immediately back the next game. And then they also called up Brett Berard, who was, like, leading the Hartford Wolfpack last season in goals. And so I was like, okay, these are very interestingly timed call-ups. I wonder if they're showing off these young prospects, because we have a pretty deep prospect pool. So, we have Othman, we have Perreault, we have Sikora. We have, like, a lot of different pieces that could, theoretically replace Trevor in some sense. So I was truly expecting us to, like, do, like, a complete package of, like, a couple young guys who probably won't get much ice time here, but would be ready for the show.
For sure, yeah.
I don't think it's completely off the table. Like, the whole discussion with Trevor Zegras is one that we go back and forth with and all the time, and kind of what his value looks like. The hype around him in the first 2 years is something we haven't seen. And again, it's not like he blew the doors off. He had 2 really good seasons, 60-plus points for a rookie, and then in your sophomore year is not bad, but it's certainly not at the elite level with some of the prospects, but it was the things he was doing on the ice that was kind of taking away from a lot of the negativity surrounding the Ducks at the time. I've never seen a guy go from that and then to what has happened the past 2 seasons. Now, he had dealt with injuries last year. That's understandable. A new coach comes in, tells him to focus on defense first. That's fine. You go into this year, same struggles are there offensively. The team's not good. The coach is still kind of drilling into to play offense, but it just feels like with him, the creativity has just completely been sapped out of his body. Like the life in him and the way he plays the game is different. I still think there's a world where before Zegras needs an extension with Anaheim that he's traded, and it's a change of scenery type trade, and it's not one the Ducks want to make, but they're in a situation where they have to. And honestly, I do think if that's the case, I don't think the Rangers are done, especially this year, but in general, they have to be one of the teams, for all the reasons you said, to be knocking on the door if that was ever a possibility to bring him in. Again, a guy from there who wants to play for that team, who grew up a fan, who brings something a little bit different to their lineup, young, can fit into kind of the new core that they're building there. He feels like a no-brainer if that was ever a case where the Ducks were looking to move on from him.
The issue is that he's not Drury's type of guy. Like, I personally think it would be a really smart trade for us, but Drury likes a big, defensively secure kind of guy. He doesn't like the creative types. So I don't know if they, like a couple of beat reporters for New York have said like, oh yeah, there's all these Zegras rumors with New York, but it's all smoke. The front office has not really been that interested in him. But also, the way that New York conducts themselves, I never know like what's honest and what's PR.
Yeah.
So I worry that, his reputation as like the young Gen Z kid who does Instagram hockey, to quote Halakett from the other night, I don't know if that would necessarily be something appealing to Drury, but I've thought about places where Trevor could go because like I do follow him pretty closely. I've had my friends and I've said like maybe Montreal or something like that, like another team that's like in a similar place to Anaheim. Doc's been struggling there, so there's different pieces that could be useful to you guys. But I definitely don't think the Rangers are done this year by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, everyone's just salivating over the amount of cap space we have because we haven't had any for a while.
Right.
Riley Smith and Sam Carrick were big off-season additions. It's not exactly like we could have made a big splash. So I'm hearing a lot of rumors, and none of them sound accurate. I don't think Steven Stamkos is coming to New York. And I mean, just God, I hope not. I hope not.
Moving on from the Trouba deal and then bringing in Stamkos would be really funny. And would largely go with my general opinion of Chris Drury. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess now, because he's like an executive, they probably don't bring it up. But, like, when he played, they never shut up about the fact that he won a Little League World Series. So I exclusively refer to him as a baseball player. As far as I'm concerned, the Rangers hired a baseball player to be their GM. Real Theo Epstein type shit. But it would be such a funny move and such a hilarious way to like burn a lot of goodwill that he just created with, I would say, a fan base that is grown frustrated with the lack of movement in the roster or progress from some of the players. But I want to ask you, like...
I think you'd be surprised how the intelligence of Rangers fans is not necessarily, like, their hockey IQ is not that... I've seen a lot of people very positively talking about maybe getting Stamkos, and I'm like, God.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I'm here for it.
They hear a flashy name, and they're like, yes, we haven't gotten one of those in, like, 5 years. We haven't made any,
yeah.
like... We did Kane and Tarasenko, and that was, like, everyone got so excited about that. And then it was a failure. So,
it's that Knicks fan brain. It's just big names. Get in big names.
Big names don't always work. Nashville is proof of that right now. Like there is such a thing as too many cooks in the kitchen, conflicting play styles, and like I follow the Lightning, but the Lightning are how I got really into hockey. Like I think Stamkos is still has it and he's great, but he's on a long contract. I don't necessarily want that.
Yeah, no, it would be again, it would have to be a team like Anaheim doing something like this, like, you know, to be like, all right, well, fuck it, let's just take 3 more years after this one at $8.5 million a year. Like, that's a significant commitment. And like, you know, I thought about Anaheim doing it because it's like, what is he going to do? Come here and be worse? Like, that's not going to happen. But like, okay, I want to ask you something because I am, as an individual, one of my many flaws is being obsessed with the way people feel about me that I can't tell. So here's the question. We don't have outsiders on a ton. What is the feeling that you have about Anaheim as an organization? Like, what is your viewpoint from 300 feet away or whatever? Like, yeah, that's my question.
Honestly, pity. Like, like I'm really sorry, but like, no, because it's like I see all the talent that you guys have acquired, and like, I know that you guys are gonna be a good team one of these days, but I worry about management. I worry about coaching. I think like the Drysdale trade was so shocking.
Yeah.
And really spoke to like him and Zegras. To me, it's such a case of roster mismanagement. Like those guys were so rushed, and like yeah, it was COVID, and like they needed bodies on the ice, but I don't think those guys got enough time to develop, and I think that makes me question if Verbeek and is it Cronin now?
Yeah, it's Cronin now.
Yeah, like I don't know if they're the guys to take this core to the next stage of things.
And you think Verbeek is part of that? Like, because that's the interesting thing to me. Like, for me to this point, my issues have mostly been coaching. I'm not out on Verbeek. I think has some missteps. I think overall the moves that he's made have been solid to good. I like what he's doing, and my big. Let me see. I like what he's doing from a player perspective. I like the players he's brought in, even if, maybe they didn't fit the role that you had hoped that they would, right? Like the John Klingberg is such a glaring example of like, oh, we signed this guy to $7 million and he was worth about 7 cents. And, so like I think, all things considered, the way he's handled the roster, making trades out, making trades in, the Drysdale for Gauthier, that's calling your shot, right? That's his, like that and Leo Carlson at 2 are his first real, like, no, man, like I'm here and I'm me and like this is what we're doing. And then you follow that up with Seneca. Like, I like where he's at. He's made some interesting decisions. He's made some questionable decisions. But like right now, the thing about him I don't trust is head coaching. Like, I don't know what the value of Greg Cronin still coaching this team is right now.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I would say Verbeek is like you said about Drury. He's like an average NHL GM. He has some great moves. He has some questionable moves. The coaching really does. It is concerning because Zegras looks like he wants to die every time he's on the ice. He does not look happy there. And like you said, he's gotten the creativity sucked out of him, which is terrible because that was his main asset, his main draw. Like that,
right.
He's this young, innovative player, and now he's lifeless. And so, definitely, coaching is like, I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about a lot of things with the Ducks. I don't know why, but like. I guess I always want good things for young teams. I always want them to be able to like make the move out of that rebuild. But like there's some kind of like bad juju over at Anaheim right now.
Yeah, we had a lot of optimism going into the season, but it feels like we've had that for like the last 3 or 4 seasons, there's always 1 or 2 young kids. Really, since Zegras and Drysdale were breaking through, is okay. Well, we've got this guy to watch. The rest of the team is not great, but what's this young kid gonna do? And then year after year, new guys breaking in. We had Leo Carlson this year. We had Carter Gauthier, Pavel Minchikov jumped in last year. It's like all these young kids jumping in. We're waiting for them to take the next step, and then we get to this point in 25 games in the season, and it's the same guys. Troy Terry's leading the team in scoring. Everybody is kind of at where they were at the year before. Carter Gauthier really, he scored tonight, but the Ducks still lost 5-1, and he's had a.
Oh, is he the one who scored?
Yeah, he's the one who scored. It hasn't got to that point yet, and I guess that's the rebuild. That's the period of rebuild for every team. You're at this point until you're not, and either you turn the table and guys take steps forward, and then you take that next step and you're a playoff team, or you're stuck in that perpetual rebuild where you're shipping guys like Zegras out the door, Drysdale out the door to bring in other young players, or you're getting top 5 picks every year and cycling these guys out until some point it works and things move in the right direction. I do want to ask a couple of Rangers questions before we run out of time. You're looking at the situation. You mentioned you have a lot of cap space right now. I think it's like $6.5 million to work with. But next year, 2 major extensions kick in. Alexis Lafreniere's extension kicks in, and Igor Shesterkin's extension kick in. And that cap space, in a sense, gets eaten up. Is this as much of a win-now season for the Rangers as it's ever been in the last few years?
Oh, entirely. Just because, all of their top guys are in their early 30s. Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, Trocheck. Their window is not just by, the sands of time is not very long. They're all still performing incredibly well for their age, but, it very much does feel like something needs to give, or else we're going to have a rebuild soon. It's not... If stuff doesn't click soon, sun's getting real low. But it's not. I don't know if they'll go to full rebuild mode if they don't win this year. I feel like they have as long as they have Shesterkin, they'll always be competitive, and they have so many young guys coming up now. Another extension that I'm worried about is Will Cooley, because he's been our best player this season by far. He's one of those kids who really earned his spot last year out of training camp and is just a worker. But given how bad the season's gone so far, he's been the only one producing still. And so it's the longer we wait to extend him, the higher the value is going to get. So we're going to add that on to Lafreniere and Shesterkin, and Capo's up at the end of this year too. And it's the first year where that's not necessary. He's not necessarily been on the block as much as he has been previously. So he might stick around. But yeah, it's very much the pressure cooker is on, which is why Trouba is getting the boot now, because Zibanejad has the no move clause, but I think if he can't get out of the slump he's in right now, they're going to figure out a way around that.
So I have to ask you this, because this was there's a writer who seems to be a Rangers fan and wrote a national column, basically, at Bleacher Report. And they said certain things about the Chris Drury of it all, that or about the success of the trade. And you articulated it very well. The cap space, the flexibility, the shake-up, the culture shift, all of these different things, the opportunity to get Mancini into the room, on a consistent basis. There's all these little trickle-down benefits for once, and it actually happens, right? From Trouba trading. But, this is the dude who signed the Zibanejad extension. This is the guy who traded Pavel Buchnevich away for Sammy Blais and Ryan Reeves.
That's Dolan's influence. That's again why I can't really gauge Drury as a.
And so I guess
figure.
that's my question. Is are we sure he's going to get the most out of this? Now, that's not necessarily fair to be he made a good move, but he could fuck it up later. Yeah, that's how it always works. But I just feel his track record is spotty enough in weird places that I'm just I'm not 100% sure giving him options is a good thing. at least if nothing else, we've seen this roster be successful. So, I just curious, like, do you have faith in his ability moving forward to, like, turn this, to keep this headed in the right direction, right? Because the Shesterkin extension basically is him saying, as long as I'm the GM, we're competing.
Yeah. I mean, like, you made a good point of, like, is giving him wiggle room a good idea? I am very like concerned about, they're saying, like, he's saying we're letting the dust settle for now, which I appreciate. Like, please don't do anything drastic. Their morale is wishy-washy enough, but, like, they're clearly not done. But, I look at recent Cup winners, and they're not necessarily making, like, crazy moves at the deadline. Like, I think about, like, Tampa Bay, like, their deadline acquisitions were, like, Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman. Like, just little pieces that, like, help you in small ways but can be really crucial at the end of the day. And those are the kinds of trades I'm more in favor for, of just, like, little adjustments here and there that make your guys better, as opposed to, going out and getting Kane or getting Tarasenko or something like that. But I think Drury is the kind of guy who, like, he wants to show off. He wants to be flat. Like, he likes to brag. I don't think, like, not personally, like, I don't think he is that way, but, like, it looks good when you make those kinds of trades.
He wants to flex that, like, he's the Rangers GM. Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know if, like, I think, like, Zibanejad complained about line chemistry at the beginning of the season. He was like, last year it was like we had some injuries and I didn't really get to build chemistry with any specific right winger. And so, like, the last thing I want them to do is introduce another big flashy name that's, hot on the market, that doesn't that, like, changes the roster composition entirely. Like, you have to make room for him. That's why Kane and Tarasenko didn't work out, because they had to completely jumble the lines. Yeah. So I'm very, like, I'm scared. I'm scared. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Everyone's releasing their targeted, like, their trade targets for the Rangers now. Right. I'm hearing Provorov's name far more than I want to.
Oh God.
But yeah, I mean, Vetrano keeps coming up, and again, I would love nothing more. That's the kind of guy I want. A guy who has good chemistry with the players, can slot in, that is liked in the locker room already. That's why, like, I liked Riley Smith as an addition this offseason. Like, everyone was like, everyone's been laughing about that, but I'm like, his brother used to play for the team. Chris Kreider knows his name. That's at least better than, like, Jack Roslovic last season, which was our big deadline position.
Yeah. Hey, I love that one. I like Jack as a player. It just didn't work.
He's doing
out.
Amazing in Carolina.
Yeah. It's so funny, like, how much the interpersonal part of it all is so important. Like, I mean, all you have to do is, like, just look at Pittsburgh, and, like, I mean, you look at Pittsburgh and you look at the fact that, like, basically they decided we're making these 3.5, if you want to include Fleury for when he was there, guys happy no matter what, and the rest of it we'll figure out. And that paid significant dividends. And then now they're in a bad spot, but they have all the success in the world, so it doesn't actually matter. Or you have teams like Winnipeg, where it's like, we are committing to this core, and it's like, okay, but just so you know, we all actually hate each other, and we would probably kill each other behind a bus stop if given the opportunity. And Blake Wheeler gets out of there, and all of a sudden he's a fucking new man, and he could not be, he looks like that Nicole Kidman picture after her divorce this first year as Rangers. Like, it's ridiculous.
They loved him.
That's, dude. He got to just leave that shitty Winnipeg locker room behind. Like, I can't imagine how happy he was. It's crazy. Like, at some point, someone really does have to sit down and just draw the line and write the story of how basically the moment they fell bad, or they broke bad with Dustin Byfuglien, that franchise fell apart. Because that's pretty much the turning point. But and none of that matters. It's such an interesting year, and I think this is, a type of trade that works where a young team is doing something bold, a veteran team is doing something bold. Is it going to work? No fucking clue. But it's interesting, and, like, that's fun. That's enjoyable. I apologize to you for this, but it's good when the Rangers are messy. It's good for everybody when you guys are like really messy. When the Rangers locker room looks like a real Housewives reunion, it's a good thing for the sport. It's the same in Montreal, it's the same in Toronto. This is good stuff. So I just want to say thank you for giving this gift to the rest of us of being able to be like, what the fuck are you guys doing over there?
There's always like I think it was Makar who made fun of Circle one time and said it's always theatrical with him, but like it is truly always theatrical with New York. Like in terms of the drama, their play, like we're very loud. Like one of my co-hosts on our podcast was saying like, because I was comparing like the Oilers are in a very similar place to the Rangers in some ways. Like they're in that wild card spot, they're not doing very great. The Oilers had the cushion of we have McDavid, we have Draisaitl, and last season we turned it around. But I was like, how come there's not as much focus on them? And my co-host was like, well, it's because you guys are so loud. Like you guys are so like in everyone's faces about it, as opposed to just like other markets that just like are quietly plodding along. And I do agree. I live for the messiness. I love it. It is good for the sport because people who might be on the periphery of the game, they might not necessarily like the technical aspects of it as much. I think about all these like new young fans who are getting into it through TikTok. They watch it like reality TV. It is like Housewives to them. And so this kind of trade going down, it's juicy, it's fun. I definitely agree with you there. No need to apologize.
It's so good. I love it so much. I just and I do think it's like it's nice to have somebody a little new, because like Toronto's just Toronto, and they're always like this, no matter if they get 10 wins in a season or 100 wins in a season. This is just how they are. This is just what it is, and it's always like that. And there's something very nice about the stability. But like, when we start to get some of these other names involved, and the Rangers are like, I think we're gonna kill our captain. And then like he shows up in Anaheim and he's in like a toga and he's got 100 knives in his back, and it's so good. It's just so good. I apologize. Like, here's the thing. The Rangers are so much fun to talk about right now that on Puck Suit they barely even mentioned that Trouba was traded to Anaheim. It is entirely just about like, what are the fucking Rangers doing? And it's beautiful. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I mean nobody really cares what happens with the Ducks after this trade. That's the thing, right? Is it the focus of the trade is less so where Trouba has gone and what that's going to look like for the Ducks and his impact there, and more so that the Rangers just traded their captain, and what are they going to do with the rest of this cap space that they have, and what else are they going to do to fix the rest of their problems? And of course, like you'd mentioned before, there was rumors about Kreider, so those will still be circling around until the Rangers do something else, because it pays more, right? People are more interested in what the Rangers are going to do, because one, the Rangers are supposed to be good, and they were good last year, and they have a lot of talent on their team, and they're in a much, much bigger market where people care a little bit more. Like, I live, again, just down the road from the Leafs, and I'm surrounded by Leafs fans, and that is all you hear about, good or bad, is with the Leafs. Is there something to do with the Leafs? The Sens could be amazing. And I remember back when the Sens were good with Alfredson and Spezza and Heatley, and the Leafs were not so good. You don't hear anything about the Sens. You still heard about, man, the Leafs are bad. What are the Leafs going to do? Nothing about the Sens, the fact that the Sens went as far as they did and almost won the Stanley Cup. I'm sure even if they won the Cup, you wouldn't really still have heard much about Ottawa. And that's just the case. That's the case with the markets and with these big teams. And in Canada, it's all about the Leafs. And Montreal to some extent as well, but we don't get that as much down here as you do in Quebec. But that's the focus at all times, is not so much what happens with the other teams that interact with these teams. It's, okay, well, they did this, now what's going to happen with them? And I love it, though. I mean, it's great. You have that in every sport. There is the handful of big teams that, no matter what they're doing, are making the headlines. No matter who they're interacting with, they are dominating the headlines.
I've always said that the Rangers are the American Leafs. Like, in terms of, like there's so many comparisons to draw between the two organizations, just even in terms of, like, roster makeup. But it is this, like, they command the attention. They play on Broadway. They have, this storied Original Six energy. I do have a question for you two, though. What is your, like, expectation for Anaheim at this stage? Like, what were you hoping going into the season? Like, wild card spot, or just be closer than you were last year? Because, like, I'm curious from your perspective, like.
Yeah, I mean, it was we had the kind of the same opinion on our preview show when we were kind of previewing the season and what our expectations were, and at the very best, it was kind of a what if type season, because there were so many possibilities for this team, and it all hinged on what are the kids going to do. What steps forward are they going to take? We know what we're going to get from John Gibson. We know what we're going to likely get from Troy Terry. Like, there's Vetrano. We know what we're going to get. Like, there's some stability in that sense with the veterans from this team. But from there's so many young kids on this team that if they all take a step forward, well, okay, they could be in a wild card spot. Some teams in the Pacific are struggling. But then there was the reality check that, and where we are now and what's the reality for the Ducks this year is that not a lot of these kids took steps forward. And we are at the bottom of the Pacific Division. Sharks are probably there because we have a ton of games in hand. But it was a kind of a mix of that. There was some optimism, and you kind of just hoped that more than anything, that some of the kids or majority of the kids would take steps forward and look like they've made some visible progression. That was the hope, and unfortunately, other than Lucas Dostal and maybe Leo Carlsson to some extent, because maybe the numbers aren't there, but he's looked really good. The rest of them have kind of either stayed status quo or taken steps backwards. So that's the unfortunate part of where we are. But I think we were tempered a little bit, right? It wasn't we're going to make the playoffs or we're going to push for a wild card spot. It was just let's hope that some of these kids do better and take steps forward in their development.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we made a case for, like you said, what could happen that ends up with this team winning a wild card spot. And I think to some degree we've seen a big piece of that play out in terms of how good Dostal has looked, right? And it's because one of those things is if Dostal takes a step and he's a legitimate starter, then you're like, yeah, we're in a really good spot. And then all the other young kids start to fit. So, like, that happened. Like, Dostal has clearly decided that, like, I want to be a full-time NHL starter, and that's what matters. And I think that's great. The problem is he's not getting any help right now. I think my goal heading into this season was that they would finish closer to 10th than they did to first. But I figured more than likely that they would end up in the bottom third of the league. I certainly had kind of talked myself into like a 6-7 position. And, I was just completely wrong about Calgary, who's playing well enough to be ahead of Anaheim in the standings. And then I was also wrong about Nashville, who's fucking terrible right now. But at this point now, like, I would say the season for me has been such a frustration that it's becoming a disappointment. And now what I want to see by the end of this year is like some semblance of optimism, like from the way that they play. Like, I want them to, like, even if it is some defensive bullshit and they just go full Tortorella, right, for the last 40 games of the year, and they just shut it all the way down, and they're just like, we're winning every game 1-0 because our goalies are good, yada yada yada. Okay, that's at least something. But right now, like, I said it after the Montreal game, like, I don't know what this team thinks it's supposed to be doing. A couple of weeks ago, Troy Terry commented about it, feeling like, I think a week or two ago, just like, we feel like we have an identity. Now we want to know. I would love to know what it is, because I don't see anything. This team, I see a lot of players that I can project, forward theoretically as these potential key pieces to a good team. But nothing about this season has made me think that next year is going to be markedly better. And I guess that's what I would hope, is by the end of this season, I have a reason to go, Okay, next year, 10 to 13, maybe, closer to a wild card spot. But right now, that's not where I'm at.
You can be bad and still have optimism. Like, I think if you talk to
100%.
any Sharks
Sharks.
fan right now, yeah, you would
Fucking hate it.
they're in the
Gross.
if when teams catch up in games played, the Sharks are likely still going to be either bottom or bottom 3 in the league. But I'm sure their fans don't feel like it because Mikael Granlund out of nowhere has stepped up and become the player everybody thought he was going to be 10 years ago when he broke into the scene of the World Juniors. Eklund has taken steps forward. Wallman's taken steps forward. Toffoli's been okay, and he was a major offseason acquisition for them, and he's just kind of filled expectations for them. And then Celebrini is almost a point per game, and they're being able to watch Will Smith. And then the team's making moves that make sense. Askarov finally comes up, and he's played pretty well in the 2 games he's played. They bring in Timothy Liljegren, which makes sense for a move for them to bring in a young defenseman. So, like, they're just kind of doing all the right things. Yeah, they're not winning hockey games, and they're still not a great team by any means, but they're fun to watch, and the all the things you hope for are on like an optimism level for the young players stepping forward and kind of your core guys to start to take steps forward to move this team in a better direction. That's happening for them. So almost losing games at that point was a given. Everybody knew they weren't going to be good, but when you have those little positive notes to look forward to, it's not frustrating. It's not bad. It's not as painful to watch. Whereas for us this year, those little kind of hopes that we had been able to want to look forward to kind of mitigate the losses, they're not there. So then the losses really start to feel like losses, and they hurt a little bit more when, if the Ducks lost 6-3, but Leo Carlsson scores a hat trick, you feel a little bit better. Or games when Zegras was in his rookie season, the Ducks lose, but Zegras scores a Michigan goal. You're like, okay, you know what? Like, that was fun. That gets you off your seat a little bit, but there just has not been any of that really for the Ducks this year.
And Jose, is that there's a lack of pressure on those young guys. Like, it seems like they really just told them, like, go play your game, have fun. You don't need to turn this team around tomorrow. There's, like, a lack of expectation, perhaps, that's, like, a healthy one. Whereas I feel like with Anaheim, they've been in this mush for a while, and so it's like, come on, guys, we need something to give. And, that's not necessarily going to produce fun hockey if kids have the weight of a franchise on them like that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Anaheim fans, just to make you feel better, please always remember, if nothing else, San Jose may look like they're headed in the right direction, but they had the choice between Shane Billiam and Sam Dickinson, and they drafted Sam Dickinson, so they still suck. Sorry, I just don't draft Cam Fowler. That's a waste of everybody's time. Draft better. Draft Shane Billiam. No, they let him go to the Wild, who are going to turn him into a fucking Norris candidate. I hate it here. It sucks. Eddie, do we have anything else, or should we?
Oh, yeah.
Let our
the
friend
last
get the hell out of here.
I
Stop
had one
having to deal
kind
with
of
us.
small question because we forgot to cover, or I forgot to cover and ask it about the Trouba situation with Braden Schneider, because Steven and I both love him a lot, and in a lot of mock trades we've made with the Rangers over the past couple of years, he was always one guy to include, that we would try to include and figure out a way to get him to Anaheim. How much has the emergence of him helped to move Jacob Trouba, and how much of a fan is he for Rangers fans to watch him? Like, how much do you guys love him and the way he's progressed, and how easy is it for you to kind of move on from Trouba with the way he's played?
Anaheim trade, I also had Schneider in like a package because fans in general, like, they're either neutral or they really love him, but he's making the best play you've ever seen, or doing absolute beer league shit. Like, he is the most inconsistent player I've seen on our team. Or some nights, and have a miscommunication with Igor the next that leads to a goal against. Like, simple shit like that. So with him, I'm torn because, and before I realized that Lindgren's really, like, not long for the city, I was like, Well, I take Lindgren over Schneider because at least Lindgren could be consistent. Not the case this year, but I think like I'm more confident that like it's becoming their core progressively. Like especially with Trouba gone, like Miller's looked really good these past couple of games, though they've been losing some of them. So I think that I know the organization really likes Schneider. They're really in on him. And they have been for a while because, during the Gallant years, a young player messing up like that normally would get kicked to the curb, but he's weathered the storm. He's finding his game. He's making less of those. There's one quote from him where, after a loss last year, he was like, "We made a couple ouchies." He's kind of reflects in his play. But he's making less of those ouchies now, so. I could see them parting ways with him, but like, I now that Mancini's come up, I would see them parting ways with him more so than Schneider.
Well, look, if you need to keep Schneider and you need to make a trade, we're more than willing to take EJ Emery. Please understand that.
Iron Grip, that's my son. I'm not.
No, I'm sorry, but I just want you to know we will gladly take EJ.
Yeah,
he was one of
was,
my favorites in the draft.
That was your biggest draft day disappointment that he did.
Bro, I was so heartbroken, man. I wanted him so bad. Well, I feel like we talked it all through pretty fairly, or pretty thoroughly. More than anything, Avery, thank you so much for sitting and talking to us. Please tell everybody where they can find you and your work and your wonderful podcast.
I am the editor-in-chief of Offside News, which is a queer-run hockey news site. We do have Ducks coverage now. It's very fun. OffsideNewsCo.com. I do Rangers recaps on there. And we have a podcast, 5 Minutes for Yapping. We do it very sporadically, but people seem to enjoy it. A lot of focus on the Real Housewives of it all with the NHL. We love the drama and the theatrics. But yeah, and then I'm usually yapping on Twitter. My handle's ADM Beaumont if anyone wants to check that out. But yeah.
Perfect. Eddie, nobody cares where they can find you because you don't tweet, you don't skeet.
No, not anymore.
And
we also podcast sporadically as well, so don't worry.
Yeah, like I said, we just a normal human increment of 23 games after a season preview before we get on. Because obviously me, as the number one stats and mathematician guy, it's important to have a serious sample size. Yeah, so shit, man, I don't even know how to get out of this. Avery, you're an absolute gem. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Eddie, stop talking about Gyökeres signing with Man United. I don't need it. I don't need it at all. All right, I'm done. Let's get the fuck out of here. Bye, everybody.